There are roads in northern Russia that do not officially exist anymore. The maps still remember them sometimes. Old truck atlases. Soviet documents. Half-deleted satellite images buried under newer routes. But the government stopped maintaining those roads years ago. Most of them were swallowed by forest, snow, and silence. Truck drivers still talk about them anyway. Usually late at night. Usually quietly. Especially the old winter roads. The kind that cut through endless Siberian forest where entire towns disappeared after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Settlements built for mines that no longer worked. Villages abandoned after the river routes froze over permanently. Fuel stations left standing beside empty highways like forgotten checkpoints from another country. Most drivers avoided those places. But not Denis Volkov. By the winter of 2019, Denis had spent almost 13 years driving cargo between Krasnoyarsk and the northern settlements near Ivankia. Food deliveries. Diesel generators. Medical supplies. Sometimes machinery for logging camps buried deep in the taiga. He preferred winter routes. The roads were quieter. The cold kept him awake. And after enough years behind the wheel, silence started feeling more comfortable than people. That January had been especially brutal. Temperatures near Turkhansk dropped below -45 several nights in a row. Diesel fuel thickened inside parked trucks. Batteries died in minutes. Even experienced drivers stopped taking unnecessary night routes. But deadlines still existed. Deliveries still had to move. And somewhere north of Lysosibirsk, Denis accepted a route most drivers refused to touch during winter storms. The old M53 bypass. Officially, the newer federal highway had replaced it years earlier. But using the bypass could still save almost 5 hours if weather conditions stayed stable. If that road had a reputation. Not because of accidents. Because of disappearances. Mostly old stories. Rumors passed between truck stops and roadside cafes. Drivers missing for a few hours. Vehicles found abandoned with engines still running. Radio transmissions from people who were already confirmed dead. Most truckers laughed about it during daylight. Almost nobody laughed after midnight. Denis heard the stories for years and ignored all of them. Until the woman on the shoulder. He left Krasnoyarsk just after sunset. Snow drifted across the highway in long white waves beneath the headlights. The forest on both sides looked endless. Black trees packed so tightly together that the darkness between them seemed solid. The farther north he drove, the fewer vehicles he saw. By midnight, the highway was nearly empty. Only snow. Only engine noise. Only the endless rhythm of tires crossing frozen asphalt. Around 1:40 a.m., Denis stopped at a roadside fuel station near an abandoned settlement called Bor. The station looked half dead. One fuel pump worked. The cafe lights flickered constantly. A radio played softly behind the counter, buried beneath static. The woman working there looked exhausted. Maybe 60 years old. Thick sweater. Pale face. Cigarette smoke trapped in her hair. She watched Denis much longer than normal while he paid. "You taking the old bypass?" she finally asked. Denis nodded. The woman glanced toward the dark highway outside. Then she lowered her voice. "If you see someone standing on the shoulder," she stopped speaking. Denis waited. The woman looked uncomfortable now, like she already regretted saying anything. "Don't stop." Denis smirked tiredly. "People still tell those stories?" "I'm serious." Something in her expression removed the humor from the conversation immediately. She leaned closer. "Especially if it's a woman." The radio behind the counter crackled loudly for a second. A burst of distorted voices spilled through the static. Then silence again. Denis looked toward it instinctively. When he turned back, the woman was staring directly at him. Not scared. Certain. She stands where the old road begins. Outside, the wind slammed snow against the station windows. Denis forced a small laugh, took his coffee, and left. But the old woman never smiled back. The bypass entrance appeared almost 40 minutes later. A faded road sign leaned sideways beneath heavy snow. Most reflective paint had peeled away years ago. The road itself looked darker than the federal highway. Narrower. Older. Forest pressing closer on both sides. Denis hesitated for the first time that night. Then he turned onto it. The tires growled softly against packed ice. No other headlights appeared ahead. No taillights behind him. Just forest. Just snow. Just darkness swallowing the road mile after mile. At 2:17 a.m., the radio inside the truck started producing static. Denis adjusted the frequency. Nothing. Only interference. Then, beneath the static, a voice appeared for less than a second. A woman's voice. Calm. Almost whispering. Help me. Denis frowned and hit the radio twice with his palm. Silence returned. He kept driving. 10 minutes later, he saw her. Standing perfectly still on the right shoulder of the road. Dark winter coat. Hands at her sides. Head slightly lowered against the snow. She did not wave. Did not move. Did not react to the truck approaching. For one strange second, Denis thought she looked unreal. Like someone placed a mannequin beside the highway. Then the headlights illuminated her face. Pale skin. Dark eyes. Snow covering her hair and shoulders. She slowly lifted her head toward the truck. And smiled. Denis immediately pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck pushed forward through the storm. In the side mirror, the woman disappeared into darkness behind him. A few seconds later, the radio crackled again. This time the voice sounded clearer. Closer. You missed the turn. Then the GPS screen lit up by itself. And showed a road that was no longer supposed to exist. Denis stared at the GPS screen for several seconds without blinking. The glowing route line cut sharply away from the bypass and disappeared into a section of forest that should not have contained any road at all. He knew this area. Not perfectly, but enough. There were only two maintained routes this far north. The federal highway and the bypass. Everything else had either collapsed, frozen over, or been abandoned decades earlier. But the GPS displayed a third road. A pale grey line hidden beneath the storm overlay. Unnamed. Without markings. Without destination data. The truck's cabin suddenly felt colder. Denis looked into the side mirror again. The woman was gone. Only snow drifted across the empty road now. He exhaled slowly and reached for the radio. Static. Nothing else. The voice had disappeared completely. Lack of sleep, he muttered to himself. That was the easiest explanation. Too many night routes. Too much caffeine. Endless darkness. Every experienced driver eventually started seeing strange things on winter roads. Shadows crossing tree lines. Shapes moving through snowstorms. Reflections that looked human for half a second. The brain hated monotony. Especially in isolation. Denis grabbed the thermos beside him and poured more coffee into the lid. Cold already. He drank it anyway. Outside, the storm thickened. Snow struck the windshield hard enough to sound like sand. The wipers struggled to keep visibility clear. Then the GPS spoke. Turn right in 800 meters. Denis froze. The navigation voice was not the normal synthetic female voice installed in the system. This one sounded real. Soft. Almost tired. He glanced at the screen again. The route had recalculated by itself. Now the truck icon slowly approached a turn hidden somewhere beyond the trees ahead. "No," Denis said quietly. He reached over and muted the device completely. Silence returned to the cabin. But the route remained visible. 800 meters. 700. 600. The road ahead curved slightly left. And then Denis saw it. A narrow opening in the forest. Half buried beneath snow. An old road. His stomach tightened immediately. The entrance looked ancient. Cracked asphalt beneath layers of ice. Bent metal posts sticking out from snowbanks. Fragments of old Soviet reflective markers barely visible under frost. No maintenance vehicles had touched this road in years. Maybe decades. The GPS screen flashed once. "Turn right." Denis kept driving past it. The truck moved another 100 meters down the bypass. Then another. Then the engine lights flickered. For less than a second, the dashboard went black. Complete darkness swallowed the cabin. When the lights returned, the fuel gauge had dropped nearly a quarter tank. Denis stared at it in disbelief. Impossible. The truck had been fully serviced before departure. He checked the temperature gauges next. Normal. Oil pressure normal. Battery normal. Only the fuel reading changed. Static exploded through the radio again. A different voice this time. Male. Weak. "Where are you?" Then another voice overlapped it. "Please answer." Then several more. Fragments. Distorted. Like broken emergency transmissions bleeding together through heavy interference. Denis gripped the wheel harder. The voices continued for almost 10 seconds before vanishing all at once. Silence again. Only engine noise remained. Then something appeared ahead on the road. Headlights. Far in the distance. A vehicle approaching from the opposite direction. Relief hit Denis immediately. Another truck. Finally. The headlights moved slowly closer through the snowfall. Large vehicle. Probably cargo transport judging by the height. Denis flashed his beams once. No response. The approaching truck continued forward silently. Closer. Closer. Then Denis noticed something wrong. The headlights were too far apart. Too high above the road. And the shape between them remained completely black. No cabin lights. No reflective markings. No visible company logo. Nothing. Just two pale headlights floating inside darkness. The vehicle passed beside him with a violent burst of snow. Denis instinctively glanced sideways through the driver window. And saw no driver inside. The cabin was empty. He nearly swerved off the road. The passing truck disappeared behind him immediately into the storm. Denis checked the side mirror. Nothing. No headlights anymore. No taillights. As if the vehicle had never existed. His breathing became uneven now. The rational part of his brain still searched for explanations, but another instinct had already taken over. Something was deeply wrong with this road. The GPS screen flickered again. The hidden road still glowed faintly on the map. This time the route line extended farther north into an area marked completely blank. No settlements. No terrain labels. Nothing. Then new text appeared across the bottom of the screen. Road available during winter only. Denis felt cold spread through his chest. Because he suddenly remembered something an older driver once told him years earlier in a roadside cafe near Tura. Some winter roads were never officially closed. They simply waited for enough snow to return. The radio crackled softly again. The woman's voice returned. Closer than before. "You're almost there." Then the truck's headlights illuminated a road sign emerging from the storm. Most of the letters had rusted away. But one word remained visible beneath layers of ice. Karakhta. Denis had never heard of it before. But according to the GPS, it was still 30 kilometers ahead. Denis drove past the sign without slowing down. Karakhta. The name meant nothing to him. He had spent over a decade driving northern cargo routes, and he knew most settlements between Krasnoyarsk Krai and the deep Evenki districts. Logging camps. Fuel depots. River ports. Forgotten mining towns with population smaller than apartment buildings. But not Karakhta. Still, the sign looked real. Old, but real. Which unsettled him more than anything else so far. Hallucinations were one thing. A physical road sign buried in the middle of nowhere was another. Snow hammered the windshield harder now. Visibility dropped to almost nothing outside the high beams. The forest pressed closer along both sides of the bypass until the trees looked like black walls moving beside the truck. Denis checked the dashboard clock. 2:53 a.m. Only 36 minutes had passed since the fuel station. That was impossible. He had already driven far longer than that. At least an hour and a half. Maybe more. He rubbed his eyes hard and checked the GPS distance counter. According to the navigation system, he had traveled only 80 kilometers since turning onto the bypass. Denis knew for a fact it should have been nearly double. A cold pressure settled slowly into his stomach. The road was wrong. Not dangerous. Not icy. Wrong. The kind of wrong the brain notices before logic does. The radio suddenly produced a loud burst of static strong enough to make Denis flinch. Then came music. Old Soviet music. Faint. Distorted beneath interference. A woman singing somewhere far away through layers of noise. The melody sounded strangely slow, like the tape itself was damaged. Denis reached to shut the radio off completely. But before his hand touched the controls, another voice interrupted the music. Male. Older. Unit 7 responding static. Road visibility near Karakhta is gone. Another burst of interference swallowed the transmission. Then silence. Denis stared forward at the road. Unit 7. It sounded official. Emergency services maybe. Road maintenance. Soviet-era transport control. But the transmission itself sounded ancient. Like something recorded decades earlier. The storm outside intensified again. Wind pushed against the side of the trailer hard enough to make the entire truck groan. Then Denis saw lights ahead. A roadside stop. Relief flooded through him instantly. The structure emerged slowly through heavy snowfall. Small building. 2 fuel pumps. Dim exterior lamps barely visible through drifting snow. A truck stop. Or at least it had once been one. As Denis approached, the headlights illuminated a faded sign hanging above the entrance. Seva Kaf. Several letters had burned out long ago. The parking area was empty except for one vehicle buried almost entirely beneath snow near the side of the building. An old was van. Denis slowed carefully. The CAF windows were dark. No movement inside. No generator noise. Nothing. It looked abandoned. And yet warm yellow light glowed faintly behind the curtains. Denis kept driving. He did not want to stop anymore. Not here. Not on this road. But as the truck passed the CAF entrance, he noticed something standing near the fuel pumps. Someone. A woman. Dark winter coat. Motionless. Head lowered. Snow gathering across her shoulders. The exact same woman. Denis felt every muscle in his body tighten instantly. No. Impossible. He had passed her nearly an hour ago. There were no intersections. No vehicles. No way for anyone to move ahead of him through the storm. And yet she stood there again, waiting. The truck rolled past slowly. This time Denis made the mistake of looking directly at her face. Her skin appeared almost grey beneath the falling snow. Lips pale. Eyes completely fixed on the truck. Not blinking. Not moving. Then she smiled again. Slowly. Like she recognized him. Denis slammed his foot against the accelerator. The engine roared louder as the truck pushed deeper into the storm. In the mirror, the woman remained standing beside the pumps until darkness swallowed her completely. Then the GPS screen changed again. The route disappeared. For several seconds the display showed only static-like distortion across the map. Then a new road appeared beneath the truck icon. The bypass was gone. Now the vehicle marker moved along a narrow white line cutting directly through untouched forest. Denis stared in disbelief. The road outside his windshield had changed too. The asphalt was gone. Now the truck rolled across packed snow. An old winter road. He never remembered turning. Panic finally broke through his exhaustion. No, Denis grabbed the wheel tighter and slowed immediately. The headlights revealed tall snow poles rising from both sides of the route every 50 meters. Old wooden markers painted red and white. Soviet winter route markers. Most leaned sideways under ice and age. Some had collapsed completely into snowdrifts. The forest here looked different too. Older somehow. The trees stood taller and denser, their branches twisting together above the road until parts of the sky vanished completely. The truck's GPS signal disappeared. No connection. The temperature outside dropped another 6 degrees in less than a minute. Inside the cabin, Denis could suddenly see his own breath. Then came the smell. Smoke. Not engine smoke. Wood smoke. Like distant chimneys burning somewhere ahead in the darkness. Denis slowed even more. And finally saw lights through the trees. A settlement. Far ahead. Dim yellow windows glowing weakly beneath snowfall. Too many lights to be a logging camp. Too small to be a town. The road descended slowly toward it between frozen trees. Denis felt genuine fear now. Because the settlement ahead did not appear abandoned. It looked alive. The radio crackled one last time. The woman's voice sounded almost gentle now. "We've been waiting for you." Then the truck engine shut off completely. The truck rolled forward in complete silence. Only the sound of snow crunching beneath the tires remained as the vehicle coasted downhill toward the lights. Denis twisted the ignition key immediately. Nothing. The dashboard stayed dark. No engine response. No electronics. Even the cabin lights had died. For several horrifying seconds, the truck became nothing more than dead metal sliding through the Siberian night. Then, without warning, the radio turned on by itself. Static flooded the cabin. Loud. Violent. And beneath it came voices. Dozens of them. Men. Women. Fragments of overlapping transmissions buried inside interference. Vehicle stuck near marker 42. Can anybody hear? Fuel line froze. There's someone on the road. Don't let her inside. Denis grabbed the radio and tried shutting it off. The knob would not move. More voices pushed through. Some crying. Some whispering. One man screaming continuously somewhere deep beneath the static. The truck finally stopped moving. Outside the windshield, the settlement waited in silence below the hill. Denis could see maybe 20 buildings through the storm now. Wooden houses. Utility poles. Snow-covered rooftops. No movement. No vehicles. No smoke from chimneys. And yet warm light still glowed behind several windows. Like the entire place had been frozen in the middle of ordinary life. The radio crackled sharply again. A new voice emerged. Clearer than the others. Male. Calm. This is Winter Route Control responding to Unit 7. A pause. Then more static. You were instructed not to use the Karakhta road after February of '86. Denis stopped breathing for a second. The transmission continued. We repeat. The road is closed. More interference swallowed the signal briefly. Then another voice answered through heavy static. Terrified. We can still see the settlement. The first voice returned immediately. There is no settlement there anymore. Silence. Then screaming. Not loud. Not sudden. Just distant human screaming slowly dissolving beneath radio interference. The transmission ended. The cabin fell quiet again. Denis stared at the dark road ahead. Every instinct told him to stay inside the truck. But the temperature in the cabin kept dropping rapidly. Without engine heat, he would freeze eventually. His hands already hurt from cold. Outside, snow drifted across the windshield in ghostly white waves. The settlement lights flickered weakly below. Still waiting. Denis reached for the flashlight beneath the passenger seat. The beam shook slightly in his hand. He opened the truck door carefully. The cold hit instantly. Brutal. The kind of Siberian cold that attacks exposed skin within seconds. Wind screamed across the winter road while Denis climbed down into knee-deep snow. The silence outside felt unnatural. No dogs barking. No generators. No voices. Only wind. And somewhere far away inside the forest metal creaking slowly. Denis turned toward the settlement. A narrow snow-covered road continued downhill between trees toward the first buildings. Old utility poles lined the route, their cables hanging loose beneath thick ice. As he walked, the flashlight beam passed over a half-buried sign near the roadside. Karakhta population. 214. Most of the lower text had faded away beneath rust. Denis kept moving. The nearest building appeared to be some kind of administration office or checkpoint. Soviet architecture. Concrete walls cracked by decades of frost. Windows glowing dim yellow behind curtains. Light meant power. Power meant heat. He climbed the frozen steps carefully and knocked against the door. No answer. The wind moaned through nearby buildings. Denis knocked harder. Still nothing. Then he noticed something strange. The snow in front of the entrance remained completely untouched. No footprints. Not a single one. Yet light still glowed inside. His chest tightened again. Slowly, Denis reached for the door handle. Warm. The metal felt warm. He pulled the door open. The smell hit him first. Dust. Rot. Wet wood. The flashlight beam swept across the interior. Empty room. Collapsed ceiling panels. Broken furniture buried beneath decades of decay. No electricity. No heat. No sign anyone had entered this building in years. But moments earlier, Denis had clearly seen lights inside. Denis backed away slowly from the doorway. Then the flashlight beam caught movement farther down the street. Someone standing between the buildings. The woman. Motionless again. Watching him. Snow drifted around her dark coat while pale light from nowhere reflected softly across her face. This time she was closer. Much closer. Denis stepped backward instinctively. The woman tilted her head slightly. Then she raised one arm and pointed deeper into the settlement. Toward a larger building near the center. An old radio tower stood behind it, barely visible through the storm. The tower lights were still blinking red. Denis felt terror crawling slowly upward through his chest now. Because he realized something impossible. The blinking tower lights were synchronized perfectly with the static bursts from the radio transmissions. Flash. Static. Flash. Static. Then the woman finally spoke aloud for the first time. Her voice sounded exactly like the one from the truck radio. Soft. Almost kind. They're still calling for help. The tower light blinked again. And all across the dark settlement other lights began turning on one by one. One by one, the windows inside Karakhta began glowing through the storm. Yellow light. Warm light. Living light. The abandoned settlement slowly awakened beneath the falling snow. Denis stood frozen near the administration building, unable to move for several seconds. The woman remained farther down the street beside the radio tower road, watching him silently. Then another figure appeared behind one of the windows nearby. A man. Denis saw only the outline at first. Someone standing perfectly still behind thin curtains inside a wooden house. Then another silhouette appeared in the next building. And another. People standing inside dark rooms all across the settlement. None of them moving. None of them looking away from him. The wind pushed loose snow through the empty street while the tower light blinked overhead. Flash. Static burst from the truck radio behind him. Flash. Another burst. The entire settlement seemed connected to that sound somehow. Denis forced himself to breathe slowly. This isn't real, he whispered. But the cold biting into his skin felt real. The snow beneath his boots felt real. And the smell drifting through Karakhta felt horribly real too. Wood smoke. Old diesel. Wet earth beneath frozen ground. Like a living settlement trapped somewhere far outside normal time. Then the radio tower groaned loudly above the storm. A long metallic creak echoed across the buildings. And suddenly every light in the settlement shut off at once. Darkness swallowed Karakhta completely. Denis nearly dropped the flashlight. For one terrible second, only the red blinking tower light remained visible through the snow. Flash! In that brief red illumination, Denis saw dozens of figures standing in the street around him. Men. Women. Children. All motionless. All pale. Then darkness returned. The flashlight beam shook violently as Denis swung it around the empty road. Nothing there. No people. Only snow. Only abandoned buildings. His breathing became ragged now. Panic was finally overpowering reason. He turned immediately and started back toward the truck. Fast at first. Then faster. Snow crunched beneath his boots while the storm thickened around him. The truck headlights still glowed faintly uphill through the trees. Thank God. If he could restart the engine, he could still leave this place. He kept walking. But after nearly 2 minutes, the truck did not seem any closer. Denis slowed. Confused. The headlights remained the exact same distance away between the trees. Impossible. He walked faster again. Still no change. The distance remained frozen. Like the road itself refused to let him leave. Then the radio tower emitted another loud crack through the storm. Static exploded across the settlement speakers hidden somewhere in darkness. And suddenly voices filled the air around him. Not from the truck anymore. From everywhere. Please respond, fuel is almost gone, we're stuck on the winter road, she's outside again. The final voice made Denis stop completely. Because he recognized it instantly. His own voice. I think I see lights ahead. Denis felt all warmth leave his body. The transmission continued through heavy static. There's a settlement here. It was his voice from earlier that night. Recorded before he had ever reached Karakhta. Before any of this happened. The realization hit him slowly and horribly. The road was replaying people. Like echoes trapped inside the storm. Denis turned toward the settlement again. Lights glowed in the windows once more. And now he could see movement inside the houses. Slow movement. Figures walking room to room behind curtains. Living ordinary moments. Someone setting a table. Someone standing near a stove. A child running briefly through one of the rooms. Like fragments of another winter repeating endlessly inside the dead settlement. Then Denis noticed the vehicles. Shapes buried beneath snow along the roadside. Not old Soviet vehicles this time. Modern ones. A cargo truck. A police was. 2 civilian cars nearly hidden beneath years of ice. All trapped here. His flashlight beam passed across one truck door. The company logo was still visible beneath frost. Yenisei Regional Transport. Denis knew that company. It still operated northbound deliveries today. His stomach twisted violently. The truck looked modern. Not decades old. Which meant some of the people who vanished here had arrived recently. Very recently. The wind shifted suddenly. And Denis heard footsteps behind him. Crunching softly through snow. Slow. Unhurried. He turned carefully. The woman stood only 20 feet away now. Closer than ever before. Her face no longer looked entirely human in the flashlight beam. The skin appeared stretched too tightly across her cheeks. Her smile slightly too wide. Snow covered her hair completely now, but none of it melted against her skin. She looked frozen. Not cold. Frozen. Like something preserved beneath ice for far too long. You shouldn't fight the road, she said softly. Denis stepped backward. What is this place? The woman's dark eyes never blinked. This is where people go when the storm doesn't let them leave. Another tower flash illuminated the settlement behind her. For 1 second, Denis saw the truth inside the windows. Not living people. Corpses. Frozen figures sitting exactly where warm silhouettes had appeared moments earlier. Families still gathered around dead dinner tables. Drivers sitting beside dark radios. Children curled beneath heavy blankets. Perfectly preserved by the cold. Then darkness returned. Denis nearly screamed. The woman took another step closer. And behind her, deep in the storm beyond Karakhta, more headlights appeared on the winter road. Another truck approaching through the snow. The headlights behind the woman moved slowly through the storm toward Karakhta. Another truck. Modern. White cab. High trailer. Denis could barely see its shape through the snowfall, but he immediately understood what was happening. The road was bringing someone else here. The woman watched him carefully while the distant truck continued approaching along the winter route behind her. Snow drifted across the empty street between the abandoned houses, and for a moment Denis noticed something deeply unnatural about the settlement itself. There were no tracks anywhere. Not from people. Not from vehicles. Fresh snow covered every road and every rooftop in one smooth, untouched layer, as if nothing had moved here for years. And yet the approaching truck kept getting closer. Denis tightened his grip on the flashlight. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "I waited on the shoulder." Her voice sounded calm now. Almost gentle. Like someone explaining something simple to a child. "You picked the road yourself." "I never turned here." "Yes, you did." The tower light blinked again through the storm. Red illumination washed briefly across the frozen buildings around them, and Denis suddenly noticed old road signs hanging beside several houses. Snow covered most of the lettering, but one number remained visible beneath the ice. Another sign farther away carried the same number. And another. Mile marker 317. Denis frowned. The bypass did not even use mile markers anymore. Only old Soviet winter routes had markings like that. Then memory returned suddenly. Years ago, another driver mentioned something strange during a delivery stop near Turkhansk, a section of winter road somewhere north of the federal highway. Drivers avoided speaking about it directly because saying the number itself supposedly brought bad luck during storms. 317. Denis never believed any of those stories. Until now. The approaching truck emerged farther from the snowstorm behind the woman. Its headlights swept across the abandoned houses, illuminating frozen windows and collapsed fences beneath thick ice. Denis could finally see the company markings faintly along the trailer. Baikal Industrial Supply. Real company. Real truck. Which meant the driver inside was still alive. For now. Denis stepped forward immediately. I need to stop him. The woman's smile faded slightly. You can try. Denis pushed past her and began running through the snow toward the road entrance. Wind tore across the settlement hard enough to steal his breath, but the truck headlights kept growing larger through the storm. He waved the flashlight wildly. The truck continued approaching. Stop! The engine roar echoed faintly through the trees now. Closer! Closer! Then Denis suddenly understood why the road felt wrong from the beginning. The truck was not moving toward Karakhta. Karakhta was moving toward the truck. The settlement itself seemed to shift subtly through the storm whenever the tower light blinked. Buildings appearing closer each time. Roads stretching unnaturally through darkness like living things rearranging themselves beneath the snow. The tower blinked again. And suddenly Denis stood directly beside the winter road. The truck burst from the storm only yards away. Its horn exploded through the night as the driver saw him at the last second. The massive vehicle skidded violently sideways across packed snow before finally stopping near the edge of the settlement. Denis ran toward the driver door immediately. A young man climbed out wearing heavy winter gear, breathing hard with panic already spreading across his face. What the hell is this place? The driver shouted over the wind. Denis grabbed his arm. Listen to me carefully. Do not follow the road into the town. The younger driver stared at him in confusion. My GPS brought me here. It said the federal route was closed. Of course it did. Behind them, warm yellow lights slowly began appearing inside the settlement windows again. One by one. The younger driver noticed them immediately. Relief crossed his face. Thank God. People. No. Denis tightened his grip harder. You don't understand. But then the radio inside the younger driver's truck crackled loudly through the open cabin door. A soft female voice drifted through the static. You can come inside now. The younger driver froze. Denis felt genuine terror crawl through his chest because he recognized the exact expression on the man's face. The same exhaustion. The same confusion. The same slow surrender to the road. The storm had a way of wearing people down. Especially lonely people. Especially tired people. Especially drivers who had spent too many nights surrounded by endless snow and silence. The woman now stood farther back near the first buildings again, watching them patiently beneath the falling snow. The younger driver pulled his arm away slowly. I just need to warm up for a few minutes. Denis shook his head immediately. There's nobody alive here. The driver looked toward the glowing windows. Toward the smoke rising from invisible chimneys. Toward the promise of warmth inside the frozen dark. Then he looked back at Denis with hollow, exhausted eyes. You look half dead yourself. Denis opened his mouth to answer. But no words came out. Because somewhere deep down, part of him no longer knew if he had truly left that road alive hours earlier. The tower light blinked again. Flash! For one terrible second, Denis saw the settlement exactly as it really was. Collapsed roofs buried beneath decades of snow. Dead vehicles frozen into the earth. Human shapes sitting motionless behind shattered windows. and dozens of pale figures standing silently in the streets around them. Waiting. Then warm lights returned once more. The illusion settled back over Karakhta like fresh snow. The younger driver slowly turned toward the settlement and began walking. Denis almost followed him. Almost. But then another sound drifted through the storm behind them. Engines. Several engines. Far away on the winter road. More headlights appeared faintly through the snowfall beyond the trees. The road was bringing others. Denis looked once more toward the woman near the buildings. She smiled softly. Not cruelly. Not happily. Just patiently. Like someone standing beside a road she had watched for a very long time. The tower blinked again. And somewhere inside the endless Siberian storm, another GPS quietly recalculated its route toward mile marker 317.